My name is Justin Decloux, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we are talking about one of the most heralded filmmakers working today, Jia Zhangke.
And it's great that you introduce him like that, because we just spent the last 10 minutes watching several, or the beginnings of several, like film festival Q&As and masterclasses and, director's dialogues on YouTube, trying to get the right pronunciation. Jia Zhangke.
And now we will not say the second name ever again.
We're just going to say Jia.
We're just going to say Jia.
And that's because we don't want to disrespect him, because he is a great filmmaker.
Now, this was a topic that when Will brought it up, he's like, I know this is big. Because I think that as a director, he is like one of the film festival guys. I think he said that his last film. You're like, all right, time to do my homework. When it's at TIFF, it's time for me to go check it out.
Well, I think of Jia Zhangke as my friend who I see at TIFF. Mm-hmm. Every few years, he has a new movie. I've been seeing his movies when they're new since, I think, Still Life, whenever that came out here, maybe 2007, 2008. Visiting his world, usually at TIFF, not really spending much time with him, not at film festivals. I don't know. It feels like visiting, not just visiting him, but visiting China and being like, okay, where's China at? Because more than any like internationally renowned filmmaker of his level, his movies are about the changing face of China of the last 20 years.
And he's a filmmaker whose career started in the film festival circuit, could probably not have existed without it, because his first 3 pictures didn't get official releases in China.
Yeah, he's a remarkable figure because he started as an underground filmmaker in China, making movies that were acclaimed on the international festival circuit, but not commercially distributed at home. They would play at film clubs or underground screenings.
In a documentary that I watched about him, he talks about like that need of wanting to play in like normal theaters in China, and the fact that he went to a DVD bootleg stall and they had a stack of his movies, and he wasn't a huge fan of that either. But like the fact that they were getting out there, these 3-hour experimental narrative features, that's saying something.
Well, the first of his films to be passed for commercial release in China was his 3rd feature. I guess by some counts it's his 4th, whether or not you consider an hour-long movie a feature. But 2004 is The World. And since then, he has sought to work within the system. He's a well-known public figure in China. He's a columnist. He's a regular TV panelist.
He's a teacher as well.
He's an entrepreneur. I mean, he has founded...
Sounds like a capitalist to me.
It's socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Right, all right, yes.
But he has founded a number of big arts institutions in his hometown of Fenyang. Most notably the Pingyao Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon International Film Festival. That's what it's called. He so much wants to work within the system that in 2018, he became a deputy of the National People's Congress, one of China's highest government branches. And despite all that, he makes films that are ambivalent, or at least have very textured emotions about China's rapid modernization. They are not propaganda films.
Well, not yet. I'm surprised going through his filmography, he has not been called upon to make, a celebratory film about perhaps China having a victory during the Korean War or something like that.
I mean, I'm kind of curious about this too, and I don't know. I genuinely don't know what to attribute it to. I mean, everything I've read about the Chinese film industry says that if you're a director like Zhang Yimou or Chen Cage, somebody will come to you and say, hey, make our film about the founding of the Republic, and then you make one for us, maybe you get to make one for you.
Or if you're Chen Cage, one for them, seemingly for the rest of their career.
Yeah. I look at Jia Zhangke's filmography, and it looks like it only seems like one's for me. Mm-hmm. They all seem very consistent with each other. They seem, and he's gone in a somewhat more commercial direction in recent films compared to his early ones.
Yeah, but compared to his early ones.
But that's only compared to his early ones. It seems like a career without the kind of compromises that Zhang Yimou's has.
It feels like he hit that art house darling category, and mainland China's like, all right, he's our guy. He's the one who's going to go out there and make films that fit that prerogative. While Zhang Yimou and Chen Cage, they're like, you guys, you make a film about snipers, I guess.
We'll get to more on them. But it's remarkable that, especially in the last decade or so, when China's film industry has become more and more self-sufficient, they don't need the approval of the international film festival scene.
They don't need it, but they want it.
Well,
everybody does. That's
Well, sure, but it's like in the 90s, there were movies like Farewell, My Concubine, movies that would only have been possible at a moment when China is trying to make inroads, it is trying to present itself to the global marketplace. And in the last 10 years, China's film industry, has been really encouraged to take a very commercial direction. I think it's become more conservative, and it's been, towards a lot of these very big blockbusters, these patriotic blockbusters. And yet, Jia Zhangke keeps on keeping on making these movies.
I think that as we talk about the movies we watch for this podcast, his thematic obsessions can be viewed in many different ways, and that you can have similar stories, but you come away from them with something different. Almost all his films are about the passage of time, how things change, how choices that you make basically can lead to misery over the long run. And you look at Platform, and that is about, growing up, having the world that you live in go from a more communist organization to a capitalist one. And then you have something like Mountains Made Apart, which is also about the passage of time, but it's almost looking back more nostalgically towards it, while the Platform is more about a corruption that's happening that is now in the modern day.
Now, even though he makes films that are textured and sometimes even critical of modern China, he's not a dissident filmmaker.
No.
He, I think, regards himself or wants to be a truly national filmmaker. He wants to be a chronicler of China, and maybe a little bit of table setting of Chinese film history is in order.
All right. Year one.
How far do we go back? Do we go back to the Tang Dynasty?
No, I don't think we need to do that.
Okay, so between the founding of the People's Republic in 1949 and the Cultural Revolution and its end in 1976 with the death of Chairman Mao, the cinema of mainland China looked a certain way. The ruling Chinese Communist Party saw cinema as a propaganda tool. So for all those years, you have a lot of movies that are kind of dry historical epics,
Yeah, there were a certain number of approved text, like Taking of Tiger Mountain, for example. So you get the opera version of that movie.
That's right. And importantly, most of these movies were not popular.
No, the homework.
Even domestically, people didn't go see these movies. And,
well, if you ask a filmmaker now, they'll probably mention those movies.
Well, Jia Zhangke was born in 1970, and as he said in interviews, when he was growing up, like as a child, there was no pop culture. And that started to change after Mao Zedong's death in 1976. In 78, 79, Deng Xiaoping started to bring in reforms, economic reforms, as well as cultural reforms, a gradual opening up of China to influences and cultural products from Hong Kong, Taiwan, Europe, eventually even the United States. So in interviews, Jia has talked about, hearing the music of Teresa Tang from Taiwan and that kind of blowing his mind, seeing bootlegs of the Canon Films movie Breakin'.
Whoa. Bootlegs? That is not sanctioned by the government, and I cannot approve of anyone consuming that.
Oh, man, he's in a gulag right now. It's just because we said that. That's terrible.
Yes.
And, of course, the most famous mainland Chinese filmmakers, probably in history, probably to this day, are the so-called fifth generation. These are the filmmakers who graduated from the Beijing Film Academy in 1982. They were the first group of filmmakers who studied and began working after the end of the Cultural Revolution and the beginning of all these reforms. And the landmark fifth generation film is Yellow Earth by Chen Cage, which was released in 1984.
Which asks the question, what if you made a mainland Chinese film that didn't feel like you were choking down oatmeal? Now, that's not to say that there weren't any interesting stuffs before then.
Yeah.
I've seen like those giant encyclopedias that are like mainland Chinese cinema, like before the fifth generation, and there's 2 giant volumes, and I was like, there's got to be some good stuff in there, right?
I was just this last week, I was flipping through an old issue of CinemaScope from 2007, and there was an article about like reassessing the fourth generation. These are filmmakers who studied before the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution, there was no filmmaking during the Cultural Revolution. And then they worked for like 4 or 5 years after that before like the fifth generation really came into prominence. And some of those movies are apparently interesting. I would like to learn more about the fourth generation. But anyway, Yellow Earth, which is not a didactic film. It's very melancholic in
very
its tone.
beautiful.
Yeah, and the story is told through symbolism and suggestion, and it's not telling you what to think necessarily.
As a censor, I don't know how I feel about that.
And that film put mainland Chinese cinema on the map internationally. And that film was also, he didn't see it in first run, but in his early 20s, Jia Zhangke saw that film, and that was an epiphany for him. That made him want to become a filmmaker.
And so as a filmmaker, he started shooting on film, making personal projects. Have you seen his first one, Pickpocket?
I have not, no.
And so this one is like shot on very grainy celluloid.
16 millimeter, I think.
It's in his hometown. There's like male nudity. It is a film that was never designed to be distributed legally in mainland China. That like he was making this for him, and it got out onto the festival circuit and already made him a darling right from there.
And he studied at the Beijing Film Academy. He's the leading figure of the so-called sixth generation, which came after.
Now, looking at his history, what's this? His grandfather owned a bunch of property and was a doctor. Yes, that's how someone like that is allowed to, go to university, make films, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, it's same as it ever was, you know?
Same as it ever was.
But when he was studying at the Beijing Film Academy, students there had access to the great films by, European and American masters. Regular people in China may not have had access to The Godfather or Apocalypse Now, to say nothing of Bresson. But he did. And so deep immersion into cinema like that opened up a whole world for him. And I know that Ho Xiaoshen from Taiwan in particular was a major influence, which you can see on
Absolutely.
Platform.
And you look at Platform, like his big breakout film, that poster, what if Mao was upside down?
That's got to be the American post. That's how you sell that movie to Americans. Yeah.
Is all about, static shots at first of just seeing these young teens who are in a theatrical troupe, and you just follow them through all these little tableaus as time passes. And like all the films that I watched this week, the stylistic formalism evolves as it goes on. So like as it goes on, as capitalism is more introduced and becomes more prevalent, the camera starts moving a little bit. And that like it feels different than what came before.
Yeah, I mean, so Platform, which was released in the year 2000, the version that I saw on the Criterion Channel is 2.5 hours long.
Yes.
I believe there's a 3-hour director's cut.
I don't think it's out there. Yeah, It's the
Okay.
one that played at Venice. It was like 192 minutes.
Definitely. I mean, look, this is a challenging film for a Western audience, not only because it's about China, but also because of the way he shoots it. I mean, mentioned Ho Xiaoshen. Much like Ho Xiaoshen, it's these, long shots that don't necessarily tell the viewer what to think, don't underline the point. So, there's an early scene where they're listening to Teresa Tang on the radio, and there's nothing about the way that he films that underlines what a seismic moment this is.
But you know. Yeah.
But I mean, it's an extraordinary film that has a big cumulative impact as it goes along.
Yeah, because these characters are introduced to things like trains or rock and roll music.
Right. So it follows this troupe of live performers over the course of 20 years, from 1979 to the turn of the millennium. And as it begins, they're in their like late teens, early 20s. They perform old Chinese opera standards about great moments in Chinese history. As you said, the approved texts. They do their Taking of Tiger Mountain stage play, and it looks to me very boring.
Yes. As, dirty Westerners. That's what we think, right?
I mean, maybe it's a very inspirational story. I don't know. And there are 4 central characters. You've got Zhang and Zhong. Zhang is the most rapidly westernizing of them. He's starting to dress in modern styles. He's got bell bottoms.
His haircut, so funny when he has it like in that like greaser style point.
And Zhang is his sometimes girlfriend. So there are these 2 couples, basically. There's them, and there's also Koi and Yin. Yin being played by Zhao Tao, who is the filmmaker's wife and leading lady in all of his films. But anyway, like Zhang and Zhong, he gets her pregnant and she gets an abortion. They're in love, but they're living in sin, and that goes against.
Watching this movie, I was like, as it played along, and I kind of knew what the main conceit of it was. Is there something nostalgic about the beginning of the film? Is it more innocent? Because the way he shoots it makes it feel miserable.
So I think this is what's interesting about the movie, because I don't think there's anything that's quite linear about it. Well, aside from the passage of time, which is very linear.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's a cinema sin if there ever was
Actually,
one.
There's a lot that's linear about it. But what's not linear is like to what extent the beginning is good and the end is bad.
Because like one of the great moments of joy is them when they're on a trip with the theatrical troupe and they're listening to some rock and roll music.
The texts that they're performing at the beginning, I believe we are intended to regard as boring.
Yes.
But we're also, I think, supposed to regard the incursion of American and Western popular culture as something we should be skeptical of. And the sexual liberation that takes place throughout the movie, I also think he's ambivalent about. So like, obviously it's bad that there's this one couple that like, are having this relationship that nobody approves of because they're not married. And
at one point, the cops show up and they're like, hey, you can't be in a bed unless you're married. You have the documents.
That's right. But then also there's the other couple who, her father is this very conservative military guy who doesn't approve of
their relationship. Yeah.
And that's bad too,
So just the world sucks, basically, with little pockets of joy in it.
Yeah. And, we see like kind of exploitation of workers throughout the movie from beginning to end. There are things like one of the characters gets a perm.
The big pompadour thing.
The bell bottoms too. Like, I don't necessarily like when the character gets the bell bottoms early in the movie, the older characters are very aghast at this. And I don't think we're supposed to be on their side.
No.
But then also, are the bell bottoms good?
Well, I mean,
they're not, but that's just my opinion.
The thing about all of his movies is that like the passage of time is crushing.
Yeah.
That's what they're all about.
That's right.
Like it just gets worse and worse and worse. I mean, looking at the world, hey man, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
And Platform is so self-conscious in its construction that like, yes, this is a film that you would see at a film festival. That like, it makes sense. It's long, it's beautiful, it really captures the area that's in front of the camera in a way that, I mean, a lot of mainland Chinese films do it, but not often in a kind of, I want to say there's no artifice. That's not true, because just from the conceit of putting the camera down and filming, you're creating something artificial.
He's trying to be naturalistic,
artificial,
though.
Yeah.
A difference that this movie has with, some more propagandistic Chinese movies is it's not meant to idealize what we're seeing.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of, he sets most of his movies in these very like liminal and transient spaces, ugly apartment complexes, ugly offices, bus stops,
rural areas, basically.
Yeah, stuff like that. And then also in some of these other movies, as areas get more and more modernized, they don't necessarily get prettier.
No.
Stylistically also, this early one, Platform, I mean, he's constantly shooting in these long takes, but also like long faraway shots. I think he probably got this from Yellow Earth, maybe. Just the compositions of like the vast landscape that are dwarfing these characters.
But he gets like closer and closer as the movie goes along, as if you're like, as the world is expanding around them, they're dreaming of what is beyond our walls, which are, I believe, his hometown.
Right.
And like, what is beyond it? Nothing that good. But even at home, it's not that good either.
That's
so
right.
It's like a mix of there's misery here, misery there, but at the end it's just the reality of the world.
Now, I watched Unknown Pleasures, his one right after. So like the first one, Pickpocket, he made on 16 millimeter, then he did Platform in 35 millimeter, and Unknown Pleasures was shot on digital video. Early digital video.
And a lot of these films were funded by international organizations that by, having a hit on the festival, getting his bona fides, he could get investment from outward to make his films.
The influence of the fifth generation on the sixth generation, I think, was really more just showing that a movie can be good rather than like the specific like stylistic aesthetic tropes of it, because like the Zhang Yimou movies, the Chen Cage movies, they're so like beautiful in a kind of
ornate.
Yeah. Whereas the sixth generation is really known for making these movies that are gritty, raw, hard-edged, very naturalistic, very much looking at what China actually looks like at that time. This one, Unknown Pleasures, case in point. It's shot on really raw digital video.
Love it.
And it's about these like young characters, people in their early 20s who are, disaffected youth, basically, young delinquents who, they're somewhere between. They're cut off from their traditions, and they're also inundated with all this Western culture.
Now, I didn't see this one other than a few clips in a documentary I watched. How do you feel it fits within the movement of digital video that was happening around this time?
So maybe somebody who knows Jia Zhangke can correct me and give a more accurate perception of what he was actually doing with this technology. Like, it didn't look pretty to me. Well, it looked to me like out of necessity, sort of.
Yeah.
It's like this is an underground covert movie.
I don't think you could conventionally call most of his films pretty beyond the like, oh, wow, I'm seeing this. This is very formal in its construction, but it's about as far away as you get from like Zhang Yimou, for example.
That's right. And by the way, there's a great book called Jia Zhangke Speaks Out. I don't know if you have this one.
No, I don't have this one.
It's a collection of his like newspaper columns from like the 2000s.
Ooh.
And he's very critical of Zhang Yimou throughout that book.
Wow.
And there's a whole, I don't have it in front of me, but like he makes fun of Curse of the Golden Flower a lot. And it's like, and he says words to the effect of, more politely worded than this, but words to the effect of, like, I hate how these big Zhang Yimou blockbusters come out and it's your, like, civic obligation to go see them.
Oh, that
Why
rules.
can't we have good movies?
I don't think he would say that now.
No, not necessarily. Although what I will say about him is that in 2021, the China National Radio and Television Administration put out new guidelines for like good movie making and saying that people with the wrong politics, morals, and aesthetics, like the wrong, quote unquote, can't work in culture. And he spoke out against that.
Wow.
He said art creation should be eclectic. He said that on TV. So, I mean, I don't know.
Man, what dirt does he have on these officials that he's... I want to say running free, but not really, because like in that documentary that I mentioned, at the end, Touch of Sin gets not approved.
Yeah,
and
that's
he's
right.
like, oh, God, I'm so sick. I went to the doctor. I have like heart palpitations. My guts are a mess.
And I know that Ash's Purest White went through a long censorship back and forth. It's funny, though. There's a filmmaker called Liu Ye, who's also a sixth-generation filmmaker. In 2006, he made a film called Summer Palace, which was quite sexually explicit, dealt very directly with Tiananmen Square. That played at the Cannes Film Festival, and he got a ban for 5 years for making movies. So I don't think Jia Zhangke would make that movie.
Well, he did make a short about the Tiananmen Square, and he said, I was very naive back then, if he ever gets asked about it in interviews.
I mean, his movies say a lot without saying a lot. And I suspect also, like, he's making the movies he wants to make, more or less. I don't think, again, he's not a dissident. I think he just wants to be a chronicler of China.
Now, Mountains May Depart. This is another big festival hit.
So I kind of love this movie, but I understand that it's the most problematic of them all.
Yeah, so I watched this last in my journey through this filmmaker's work, and I was like, all right, I get it. Like, we're going through this again. This one stars Zhao Tao again. The conceit in this one is it's broken into 3. Each one has a different aspect ratio, and they basically have different tones. It's the first one being on the level of like a soap opera where like a whole bunch of wild stuff is happening all the time. The second one is more of like, okay, this is real life. And then the third one happening in the far future of 2025. I do not like the third part very much, but we can get to that.
Okay, so most people don't like the third part very much. I kind of like the third part. Even though, look, the acting...
What if I could have a relationship with, say, mom-like figure, who's also a very famous Taiwanese actor, who in the film maybe voices her regrets about not being able to go back.
Yeah, right. Sylvia Chang, who when I saw this movie at TIFF, Sylvia Chang was there. And the audience was very excited.
She's very, very famous.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, obviously, this kid who sort of, his long journey represents like the long journey of China during this period of struggle and transition.
So just to give a quick synopsis. So the first part is like a love triangle between a woman and 2 men, and she picks the capitalist out of both.
West.
Yes. The second part is about her living with the regret of the decision she made, and she has a child that she never sees who visits, and they connect a little bit. The third part, in the future...
But she loses the child, basically.
Yeah. He goes away. She doesn't see him after that.
Yeah.
And the third part, that child is now named Dollar. He lives in Australia. He only speaks English because he doesn't know Mandarin. And
he communicates to his father through Google Translate, basically, which leads to the iconic line, "You wish Google Translate was your son."
Yep. And the dad now, who the makeup they put on the dad is like, how do we make him look old? Give him a big bushy mustache. Also, listen, we're in the English language world here, Australia. So he's going to be playing with a gun every time that we see him. And that kid's name is now Dollar.
Yeah, so that's all a little much, and I can't rationally defend any of that.
But you can respond it emotionally.
Emotionally, I find it very powerful, especially the last shot.
Yeah,
the last shot's incredible.
I just found that like that third part is not only just on the nose, but emotionally manipulative in a way that like it played its hand a little too much.
And unusual for him, for sure.
But I really like that first and second part, especially the first part. He does it again in Ash, which is like the first part is almost hyperkinetic to make it feel so stark when you get to the, all right, now time has passed, we're getting to the next thing.
Right. So we wanted in this discussion to sort of start with him at the start and then flash forward to where he is now. Ash's Purest White from 2018, I think, has had his widest release in China, and in some ways is his most conventional film.
Still have the same structure as Mountains May Depart, though.
And like, it's still an art house movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is inspired very loosely by, Hong Kong gangster movies of the 1980s, particularly A Better Tomorrow, which we see a clip of in the film.
The song from The Killer plays all the time in the first part. Yeah, sung by Sally, yeah.
I know from reading about the film that the movie deals in the concept of Jianghu. That's Jianghu. And that is a term that has many different meanings.
Don't try to define it.
But what I do know is that in this context, it has something to do with honor and brotherhood and loyalty.
Like
things that may be endangered species in modern capitalism.
In the first part, at some point, it's almost cartoony. Zhao Tao, who's basically the mole of a local gangster, they're in a bar, and he takes a cigarette out, and like 5 hands come in with like lights to light a cigarette. There's a one-take fight scene where he gets out of a car and like beats up a bunch of guys.
Yeah, so these early scenes seemed very out of character for him.
But it's all handheld as well, almost to give it an immediacy that handheld style is gone in the next 2 parts.
The movie takes place over 17 years, and the actors, I think, quite convincingly...
Yes. No big bushy mustaches. Yeah. Oh, wait, I think there are near the end. I think the main guy may have a mustache.
Yeah, but I think they do the transition pretty convincingly. Even, Zhao Tao...
She just has a lot of makeup in that first part, and then they just strip it off in the next.
That's right, and she's got long hair in the first part. Yeah, she plays this gangster's mole who she is carrying her boyfriend's gun. He's a local crime boss. She fires the gun like as a warning shot during a fight. And because the authorities catch her with this, unregistered gun, and she won't rat out her boyfriend. She says, "Oh, it was my gun. It was my gun." She serves 5 years in prison for him. Then she comes out after 5 years to find he's gone. He's become a legitimate businessman somewhere. He's got a new girlfriend, and he doesn't want to see her. So he has lost this fundamental concept, one that I hold very dear to my heart.
Of Jianghu.
Of Jianghu.
Yep. We've all seen the movie Jianghu featuring Jackie Chung, right?
That's right.
No?
And much of the midsection of the film is her, going from the prison to the Three Gorges area, which, as the announcer on the ferry boat that she's riding provocatively states, much of what you'll be seeing on this ride will be underwater in several years.
The world is rotting. Time crushes us all.
She tries to meet her old boyfriend. Of course, he won't come down to see her. So much of the film is her just going from area to area, place to place, stealing meals where she can. Well, frankly, it seems like 20 years have been condensed into this 5 years she's been away in prison.
Mm-hmm. And it's also about, like, what do you hang on to? Because where the film ends up is like, oh, is there a kind of not happy ending, but pleasant ending? No, there can't be, because we're human and we're self-destructive in our way.
The ending is amazing. I also thought it was going to
have like a little bit of, more of a pleasantry. Yeah,
exactly. But it doesn't.
I love the ending of this movie.
Like there's a suggestion, much like with Platform, that like you can't go home again.
No, you can't. Like time keeps moving. You can't keep looking back or wanting to hold on to the thing that was there before.
And the last shot, I don't think it's a spoiler to say the last shot involves like surveillance camera.
Oh yeah.
Like that also suggests that like Jianghu can't live in this world. This is this is a new world.
But is it like that first section? Is it real what's being experienced, or is it just again in passing? It's a question that you keep have to ask yourself watching these movies.
Absolutely.
There is that surreal feeling. For example, like a guy shows up and there's 2 ballroom dancers that just dance on the floor of a disco, and people are having a ball with it. But like that is a moment in time that you cannot return, and it cannot exist beyond that like brief thing before it just chokes and dies. Mm-hmm. This is his most conventional, but again, it's just returning to the same themes that he goes back to again and again and again.
And I would also say that like I enjoyed this movie just as a Westerner. Like I feel like this is what China looks like. Mm-hmm. Like I enjoy seeing his movies just to see that.
Well, what's funny is that like watching all these movies, I messaged Will and I was like, can you think of like one mainland Chinese film that takes place in more of a urban environment that we would see?
Well, I saw one
other than Detective Chinatown, I guess.
I saw Zhang Yimou's most recent film, which I think is called
that one does.
Under the Light.
Yes.
Which I actually thought was okay.
Mm-hmm. If you like neon, This movie's got a lot of it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But like most of the movies that I feel get internationally exported are kind of like, all right, we're going to the rural areas. We're seeing these stone houses where people live.
Or
everyone's in puffy jackets.
Or a lot of them, frankly, are, historic epics. Like I've seen, maybe people who know this better can correct me, but I've seen a trend in these big Chinese blockbusters towards like the taking of Tiger Mountain again.
Well, they're all like that.
Yeah.
All of them. Like we were looking at Chen Cage's filmography and he has 4 of those movies back to back to back.
Man, what happened to Chen Cage? I mean, Jesus Christ.
I mean, we're looking at his filmography and have we done an episode on him? I feel like we have.
No, we haven't. And I think the reason is, I mean, I don't personally find him that interesting.
I mean, don't you find that need almost for a international acceptance? Like that's why you would do those big wuxia films. Because that's what works internationally.
Chen Cage is the most interesting, in some ways, the most interesting of all those guys. I just said he's the least interesting, but actually, in some ways, he's the most interesting because he starts with Yellow Earth, Farewell My Concubine, and then there's like that Heather Graham erotic thriller that he made, and there are some kind of mid art movies from the 90s, and now it's just like The Gallants or The Volunteers or The Battle at Lake whatever,
Well, I remember when he seemed to have been one of the guys that someone in the government film bureau was like, you'll be our international film guy, because like Legend of the Cat played one year at TIFF, and you recall the next year they played the director's cut.
I do remember
I was like, that is bananas. The same movie is playing twice 2 years in a row.
Do you remember The Promise?
Of course I remember The Promise.
Because that came here in 2006 or whatever.
Well, because they were like, this is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right?
You like Hero? Well, here's your new hero.
And everyone went, no, thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely be doing a Chen Cage
episode. I'd love to. I'm getting all hyped up now, yeah.
But where is Jia's career going?
So I saw his...
AI.
Yeah, it does seem that way because he's experimenting with AI. They're all experimenting with AI now.
Yep. Bad.
I mean, I saw his new movie at TIFF this year, and I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, that's what everyone said.
First half is
it split into 3 parts?
It's split into 2 parts.
Ooh, okay.
First half is basically it's a collection of footage, unused takes, deleted scenes, a lot of stuff he's accumulated over his 25 years of making movies. And you see, basically it functions as like a visual tour of the last quarter century of China. And then the second half is set in China during the pandemic. And you get to see Zhao Tao like interacting with like a robot and,
cool.
like a robot waiter and stuff like that.
Yeah. President's bad, I guess.
Yeah. And, like all of his movies, it's a movie that doesn't tell you what to think.
Yeah.
But it presents all this stuff and says, what do you think of it?
Now, I know people will be listening to this episode and be like, what? You didn't talk about this movie. There's only so much time in the day, my friend.
Man, this is a hard filmmaker to talk about.
What did you think of A Touch of Sin?
I loved it. Yeah.
I thought it was okay.
Okay.
And I thought that like the first part, I'm like, here we go. And then the second part, I'm like, all right, here we go again. Wait, there's 4 of these?
Okay.
All about, violence and the way that, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, there's a boil and then the boil erupts.
Yep.
Or a simmer, I should say. A simmer and then it turns into a boil.
You know what? I'm nodding watching the movie.
Metaphors are terrible for me.
And I'm like, I see what you're doing and I can understand why this film was banned by... But if you look at the ways that he kind of tries to get through it is by like basing it on real events, because it'd be like, all these were based on real events, so I'm not really making it up, right?
Right.
But because a lot of people are like, you guys got to watch that one. I've seen it. Boy, they're all so long too. That's the other issue.
Well, that's the other issue. So we're doing the best we can with this topic. But
I'm gonna go on a limb and say, great filmmaker.
He's a great filmmaker. Yeah. And I'm very excited to see what he does next, because I don't know how you can have a career like this
that continues.
Yeah. And I'm just interested to see what happens, especially like to make movies that are this, I think, honest. And again, I've said it a few times. He's not a dissident. He's just a filmmaker who's interested in accurately chronicling the country. It seems like that impulse is going against sort of like what official culture is supposed to be in China.
He's going to make one of those films, right? Like The Volunteers or something like that.
One of those big epics. I mean, it seems...
He's dodged it till now.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I'm curious.
I do also enjoy, like we mentioned, the film festival he runs. He's very involved in like cinema in mainland China, as well as producing a ton of films, appearing in films as an actor. He shows up in one of my favorite films of last year, Black Dog from 2024. So he's not just like making stuff on his own. He's also like building an industry where like they would prefer that it not exist in the way that he makes films.
I mean, I admire him. I admire that all of his entrepreneurial activities seem to be devoted to like making good movies.
Absolutely. So, as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. Our first letter is from Enrico, and he goes, "Hey, Justin and Will. I've just finished listening to your all mailbag episode, and I was surprised that Australia's own Alice Mayo McKay did not come up in the letter listing trans filmmakers of note." There were a lot of filmmakers listed in that letter, though.
That's right. And I believe there was a letterbox list that people can see called ICC Trans Film Recommendations.
I'm glad we can have that stolen valor.
Yeah.
Like, we're the ones who recommended even though we just read someone's letter.
We just read a letter. Yeah.
The letter continues. She's only 20 and has already directed, written, and produced 5 feature-length films with delightful titles such as Satanic Panic and Carnage for Christmas, edited by Vera Drew. Each of these films is a low-budget horror gem, foregrounding trans and queer experiences, and they're all 80 minutes or less.
Satanic Panic. I've heard of this one.
No, you may be thinking of a different one called Satanic Panic.
Okay.
Yeah. They should also be pretty easy to access. I would highly, highly recommend her work if you haven't heard of it already. Your Patreon episode on public domain DVD special features made me laugh a lot. And thanks also for putting Leslie Stevens' Incubus on my radar. I had a great time watching it. And I wish Justin all the best with parenthood. I have many fond memories watching movies while bouncing up and down on an exercise ball with my newborn strapped to my torso. This is an issue I'm having, which is like, we want to avoid baby to be watching TV because it's easily distracted and can create weird neurons and stuff like that.
Sure.
But I know a lot of parents are just like, just put the TV on. The kid's distracted by it while you're watching it. The volume's low. Like, parents out there, what was your way of going about it when it came to letting your kid consume TV or not? One secret way I've tried to do it is having facing away from the TV, and I put earphones in so I can listen to television while he plays with his toys on the ground. But if he gets a glance at that TV, he doesn't want to look away, and he'll be like, trying to look at it.
You've given him a phone, right?
Of course.
He's like 4 months old.
Yep. He's playing with that phone, loves it. I don't know. What do kids play? Roblox? Is that a phone game?
Sure, yeah.
I'm about to learn, I'm sure. Skibidi Toilet, is that still popular?
Oh, yeah, Skibidi, yeah.
An episode on Skibidi Toilet coming soon to Important Cinema Club.
I'm too old to know what things like that are.
Well, you got to learn, Will. And the letter continues. My newborn is now a toddler who's developed a mild fear of Wallace and Gromit, once asking us to reassure him that they will not be coming to our house to drink his wee. Keep up the good work, Enrico. Is that a part of a Wallace and Gromit short?
I thought they liked cheese. Isn't that their thing?
Is there did he go down a YouTube rabbit hole searching Wallace and Gromit until he got to the wee drinking? Or I guess
one of those algorithmically generated cartoons.
There's a pregnant Elsa and Spider-Man in a dirty suit. Well,
you're right to be scared because I think Wallace is pretty abusive towards that dog.
I think that dog should go on his own way.
Yeah.
But that'll never happen. Our next letter is from Jerry, and he goes, I recently watched Robert Altman's film Images, and it struck me how much it felt like a modern, elevated horror film.
I've never seen Images.
Great
Have you
movie.
Seen it?
Yeah. In the way that the specters and doppelgangers that appear are manifestations of the lead character's trauma and guilt. What do you guys think of Images? And what are some older movies do you think precede modern film trends? What are modern horror trends? Self-serious.
Yeah, okay, so stuff about grief and trauma.
Yeah.
Let me see. I'm going through the Rolodex of Universal horror movies in my head and trying to think, was there one that involved grief and trauma?
I'm sure there was.
I guess they all kind of do, right?
Black Cat.
Yeah, that's right. Black Cat.
Edgar G. Ulmer's Black Cat.
Man, you got it. You got it.
Yep. And
are there other modern trends in horror? I mean, there's also
not having fun.
Okay, there's a counter trend in horror embodied by the Terrifier movies. That's
now speaking of feeling old, I'm I don't like these either. We already went through this torture gore thing back in the early 2000s. We're back here again.
But also those movies are different than Saw. They're more
goofy.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of goofiness I like.
Yeah,
they're also all 2.5 hours long.
They're a little edgelordish.
Yes, that's what I mean.
It's not like Dead Alive or a movie like that.
It's like Newgrounds in the mid 2000s. I don't know if you ever went to that website, Flash Animation.
Yeah.
And, you can't believe what you see. Bring back Stick Death Theater. Did you ever watch those?
No.
Where it's just stick
I
killing
did.
each
Yes, I did.
Oh, again, I'm getting full of ideas here. Skibidi Toilet, an episode on Stick Death Theater.
How about Homestar Runner? We gotta do a Homestar Runner up.
I never watched Homestar Runner. The only time I learned about Homestar Runner
check some emails
or watched it was when I was at a very Christian kid's neighbor's house, and he loved Homestar Runner.
Oh wow!
And a friend I had in college really liked him too. It's something I just missed.
Is that still going on? Homestar Runner? Do they still make home? Do kids today know Homestar Runner?
Kids today do not know Homestar Runner. No. Trogdor. We all played it on Guitar Hero.
That's right. Strong Bad.
Yeah, Strong Bad. you couldn't do strong bad today in that voice.
Right.
Our next letter is from Justin. Hey, not me. Hey, Justin and Will, you should do an episode on Valerian. Boy, I've said this name before. Bororskwizik.
Oh,
You know what I'm talking
the guy
about.
who
The
did
Beast.
The Beast, yeah. He also did Emmanuel 5, which I highly recommend.
He started in animation, kind of like Frank Tashlin, before moving to live action, making some wild and visually stunning films. Godot, Island of Love, Blanche, and The Beast are some of his best.
And Emmanuel 5.
Yep, some of my favorites of his. It's like a weird mix of Buñuel and Roland. Definitely an interesting figure worth covering. I'm surprised you haven't gotten into this guy's stuff.
Yeah, I'm surprised too.
Because like Arrow attempted, they put out a lot
I've got Immoral Tales at home.
Okay.
And it's, been sitting next to the TV for like 5 years waiting for me to watch it. So maybe tonight.
Maybe. Just make sure that the, your loved ones, your dogs are out of the room, especially in The Beast. You don't want to give them any ideas.
Oh.
If you've seen The Beast, you know what I'm talking about. Our next letter starts with Middlebro Auteurs. Declan writes, hey guys, cliche way to start this. Huge fan of your podcast. In general, I don't like podcasts. A lot of the time, the hosts aren't funny. They're not intellectually rigorous. And they're bloated slogs that go on and on and on. You two perfectly bounce off one another and consistently funny and informative. Well, thank you very much.
That's nice because I've heard other people say that we're not funny and we're not intellectually rigorous. So
our episodes are too short.
Yeah, so I don't know who to believe.
I have to admit, I like 3-hour podcast, but I could never record one in a million years.
I like our podcast.
Yes. Oh, actually, that's a lie. I have recorded a 3+ hour podcast. It was me and Mark Hansen about the Super Mario Brothers Blu-ray.
Oh, God.
That came out in Australia. That's probably the longest podcast I will ever record. The letter continues, which is why I recommend a topic that will kill a part of yourselves forever. A tedious Oscar Beatty middlebrow auteur like George Clooney, just his directorial efforts, or Tom Hooper.
Oh.
I've laughed the hardest listening to you guys slowly withering away while unpacking pieces of shit like the Santa Claus movies, failed star launching vehicles for SNL stars, and Ron Howard's filmography. Anyway, all the best and thanks for all the fish.
So, George Clooney's directorial career,
now we went off on a tangent about this recently. Where do we do it? Where we just ranted about?
I can't remember.
We think that George Clooney may be one of the most famous bad directors working now, and I know people will be like, "What about Good Night and Good Luck?" And,
yeah, what about
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind?
Yeah,
what about the rest of his filmography?
Yeah, I mean, one flop after another, and this is
and not flop like financially, just like out of
critically,
fucking
Leatherheads, Suburbicon, and that's just tip of the iceberg.
Boys in the Boat.
Yeah, the Monuments Men.
Yeah, the one that in the Sony hack, it was revealed that George Clooney wrote an email. It's like, I'm sorry, I did so bad.
Yeah, so I don't know what's going on with this guy. Listen, I'm going to say something really woke right now. Are you ready?
What?
If he was a woman...
Oh, he'd be...
Yeah.
Well, he's also a star, right? That's the other thing. That the George Clooney brand is recognizable. And I guess his movies make enough money. He's bad at it. At what point do you just like no more George?
Yeah.
Like that's you're not good. Like if he was playing the saxophone and he was like "Burr, burr, burr, burr," all the time, people would be like, "Hey, you can play at home, but maybe don't make the public." And the argument would be, you don't have to see them. I would agree.
That's right.
I don't have to go see them.
Most of us don't.
No, I remember sitting there watching Leatherheads and being like, God, this is so bad.
You know which one I don't hate is The Ides of March. Have you seen The Ides of March?
That's a Ryan Gosling one,
the
right?
one where the poster is the Time magazine cover.
I feel its political perspective is probably very milquetoast and middle of the road.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But what I will say is you've got Philip Seymour Hoffman,
good actors,
and Paul Giamatti.
Yeah,
hamming it up.
But you would think that like Monuments Men, I would have rushed out to see that. It's like heist film, World War II. Isn't it like John Goodman? Isn't Bill Murray in there too?
Yeah, the whole gang.
And I just like the reaction was so bad. I was like, nope, not going to see that at all.
Yeah.
And I will say this, ladies and gentlemen listening. You don't have to see bad movies that are new.
Absolutely.
Like I see people this week reviewing The Electric State, that new Joe Russo film. Why are you doing this to yourself?
Yeah.
Like, you know it's bad.
I think I really cured myself of this during the pandemic because...
Red Notice. Let's check it out.
Yeah. Well, because one in particular, it was the Judd Apatow movie, King of Staten Island.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Oh, okay. Maybe it is.
Yeah.
But what I do know is I've been going to see Judd Apatow movies year after year. not liking them very much. And then during the pandemic, King of Staten Island appears on my TV for $25. And I'm like,
$25.
And I'm like, okay, on this TV, I can watch any movie ever made.
Yes.
Or I can watch this. And it's like, there's something about going to see those movies at a theater.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it's a night out. We're part of the original audience for funny people.
Yeah, exactly.
For Trainwreck.
People will be like, wow, where were you on the opening night of Funny People?
When This Is 40 came out. Well, where was I?
I avoided This Is 40 like the plague.
I don't think you'd like it.
When we turn 40, do I own it on Blu-ray? I do. I like Judd Apatow's commentary tracks and stuff like that because he was very honest about. But I remember watching This Is 40 and being like, "This is a man just." I mean, when we turn 40 and we're still doing this podcast, Judd Apatow episode.
Like we should.
Yeah.
We're approaching 40. 40's on the horizon, and it's like, we'll be like Paul Rudd in that movie. We'll have a failing record company.
We spent $50,000 on a giant neon sign.
That's right.
We live in a giant house.
That's
right.
And
I just can't get time alone from my nagging wife and nagging kids.
That's right.
This is 40.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Anyway,
who's the other director he mentioned? Tom Hooper. I love how you never hear from him anymore.
No, Katz basically closed
Just
that.
killed it.
Yeah, killed it. Does he have anything? Did he go back to TV? Because he was a TV director. And then
maybe he's doing commercials. I don't know.
Yeah, for like gambling things.
Maybe he's living in the gutter, which is where he belongs.
Hey, I liked, and I'm in the minority of this, his version of Miserables.
Oh, yeah. Not for me, but whatever.
I remember me and my mom, we went to go see it when it came to Toronto on the touring company. Then we went home that evening and we watched the movie. Russell Crowe.
I kind of liked Russell Crowe in the movie just because, like, a guy who can't sing, having to sing that much, I'm rooting for him.
Now, who are some
Master
other...
of the house.
Let's have a middle brow auteur checkup, because I feel like we've mentioned him before, but there is one like mainstream, still making big budget films that I think is one of the worst like middle brow directors. Where I was gonna say auteur, Rob Marshall. He sucks so much. Like, and people will be like, Chicago was pretty good. Yeah, no. Chicago was 25 years ago.
It also wasn't even that good. And then after that, Memoirs of a Geisha, 9. Do you remember 9?
9 is like a film, like, how can this be bad? Like Daniel Day-Lewis. It's a semi-sequel to 8.5. It's been, I believe at that time it was on Broadway because Antonio Banderas did the original Broadway run. And that movie is so bad. Like, have you seen it?
No.
Like, you sit there and you're like, not working at all. Into the Woods.
I tell you what I have seen is Mary Poppins Returns, which fuck that movie.
Any of the actors making that film, do you look at the man's filmography and you're like, these are all bad though? Or do you just go, paycheck, maybe, Broken Clock?
Yeah, I think it's like somebody like a company like Disney. They're like, okay, this is a guy who's not going to ask too many questions, and we can trust him with $100 million or whatever to deliver. And then all these actors are like, okay, big Disney movie that opens on Christmas Day. Let's do it. Mary Poppins Returns. I don't think Meryl Streep is under any illusions what movie she's in, but it's like,
and he just made like the new Little Mermaid film. Did it come out? Because people were angry.
It did come out.
It did come out. I haven't heard anyone
tell you anything about it.
No. Now there's an episode. Disney live action remakes.
Oh wow. Well, because
is there one good one?
So probably not.
So Cinderella, Kenneth Branagh. That kicks it off. People say they like that one.
Okay.
Or no, is it Cinderella? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Cinderella. But then Beauty and the Beast was the one that made like billions of dollars.
Lion King. Ugh. I seen the guy Richie Aladdin. Ugh.
When I was watching the Oscars this year, which is the first time in like years I've seen like commercials, TV commercials, I got to see a commercial for like the new Snow White. And it's so great because the commercial began with, footage from the original animated film from the 30s.
Don't you wish you were watching this?
And it's bright and it's colorful and everything looks delightful. And then like the screen goes boom and you see like the new movie and it looks awful.
Yeah.
It's like,
people like it though.
Please, the old one, please.
Couldn't they just re-release the movies?
Why not? Yeah.
Yeah, put it all back in the vault and then have them come out in theaters.
This Lilo and Stitch remake is particularly hilarious to me because, like, live action Lilo and Stitch? All you've done is just take Lilo or Stitch, whichever one the cartoon is.
Yeah, Stitch.
And just make him a worse looking cartoon.
Yep.
And put him in a less delightful world.
Yes. As every time this comes out, people always,
let's do a live action Bugs Bunny movie where he just looks like a rabbit.
like that Lion King movie seems almost like a provocation of like, I will do the antithesis of what people like about the original. And you know what? I'm going to make $1 billion doing it.
Man, I know. Hey, do you remember that episode of The Movies That Made Us where William Friedkin was on?
Yes.
And he kept going on and on about how great The Lion King was going to be.
Did he?
Because I guess whoever directed the first one, was it Favreau?
Favreau, yeah.
Yeah. I guess he...
Favreau.
I guess he showed William Friedkin some of the test footage, and Friedkin kept being like, this movie that's coming out, this picture, The Lion King, it's going to revolutionize film.
William Friedkin has bad taste. Rest in peace.
You've never seen anything that looked this great.
Yeah.
It's so realistic. It's like photorealistic. And he just went on and on and on.
I just want to have an excuse to watch that Barry Jenkins Lion King film where they smile in this one. Now, does it look like a Joker's grin? It does.
I like that it's a prequel, because I've just been spending so many sleepless nights being like, how did these characters come to be?
Well, the Disney Remake Factory have been doing the, like, let's get auteurs to do it. Like, they got Barry Jenkins. They got the guy who did Marcel the Shell with his shoes on.
Yeah.
He's doing Lilo and Stitch. Wouldn't know it watching that trailer.
Yeah, yeah.
It looks any generic movie.
Man, the last time that I got tricked into seeing one of these was Pete's Dragon by David Lowery.
Yeah, people are like, oh man, it's so good. And I sat there being like, that's it?
It's boring.
Yeah,
and
it's like,
it's not even fun. Like the dragon's not fun like he was in the old movie.
Yep. I mean, I guess, was that part of the remake wave? I think
so, yeah. It just made less money than the other
And then
ones.
it's forgotten. Kind of like the Lady and the Tramp live action, I'm putting this in quotes, movie.
Okay, that's the most offensive of all, because it's like, what if they just looked like a normal dog and a cat?
Anyway, keep your ear tuned, because that's going to come out sooner rather than later. Oh, Marathon, Disney live action remake.
Oh my God.
No, the problem with that is people have been pitching Marathon ideas in the Discord, and what I say is there's got to be one that's the entry point.
Can we, okay.
It can't all be bad.
What if we did a marathon of good movies?
No,
have you ever thought of that?
That's not what people want. They want bad movies. I pitched one to Will, which I think is the one that we're going to do, and Will said, if nothing better happens, I guess we'll watch this one.
What about the Steve Odekirk Thumb movies?
No, that is very special. That's going to go in a vault at some point. We'll do that. But first, we'll do a Steve Odekirk episode. So no Thumb movies.
Okay.
Barnyard, the original Party Animals.
Jimmy Neutron.
High Strong.
And I guess we'll
Kung
also
Pao.
watch Kung Pao
a
again.
revisit of Kung Pao.
Yeah.
Does he have any other ones in that?
He's got to have at least one other one.
Yeah. Oh, he did Ace Ventura When Nature Calls.
That's right. He directed that.
Yeah, because he was the pitch hitter.
He replaced someone else. Yeah.
Someone who made the right decision and left that project. All right, we keep talking about what's happening next. Lots of ideas of stuff to look forward to. But what are we doing on our Patreon this week, Will?
We are talking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film franchise.
Yes, specifically the first two.
The first two, which we both saw recently. So there you go. We did Jia Zhangke, and now we're going to treat ourselves to a little dessert.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Heroes and a Half Shell.
Turtle Power. So you can check that out at patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club. And next week, we're moving on to Mr. Tim Kincaid, a.k.a. Joe Gage.
That's right. We are talking specifically about his gay pornography done under the name Joe Gage. He's well known for El Paso Wrecking Corp.
Yeah, he had a trilogy that was like his working man trilogy.
There's Kansas City Trucking Company. And
those are held in kind of like high regard as like artistic gay pornography. But Tim Kincaid, if you're like a big cult fan, you've probably seen some of his films because he was on the lower budget end of the films that Empire Pictures produced, the Charles Band Company, making films like Robot Holocaust, Mutant Hunt.
Breeders.
Yep, he produced Enemy Territory. And he also did a Carrie Fisher comedy, was like his last like feature-length straight film before taking a very long break and moving into the post-2000 era of gay pornography.
And we're also going to watch some of his later stuff, like After the Heist from 2012.
We'll watch one of those because they're all 3 hours long.
There may be some fast-forwarding. I don't know.
Listen.
Like,
and I want to tell people this is going to be a very special episode. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing something that we've never done before. That makes sense.
Okay, if you subscribe at the $15 level.
But yeah, I'm very excited about this.
Yeah,
this is a
it's gonna be
topic. It's been on our list as like a point of interest. But his filmography, other than the later cult ones, there's been no movement on those earlier films. Like, they're still exist in basically like beat up off VHS copies, even though they're held in fairly high regard for people that go and can appreciate that kind of filmmaking. So will we be the first podcast to ever deal with the early filmography of Tim Kincaid as two straight guys? Probably.
Yeah, let's see. I'm very excited to explore. I've wanted to look into him for a long time, and now we're going to do it.
So that's what we're happening next week. And until then, my name's Justin Decloux.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. Will, it was Oscar's biggest night. Wait, Oscar's? The movie's biggest night.
That was, wow, it's a little bit in the past now. It's like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but, people want our hot takes, to which I say Conan O'Brien, fun host.
Yeah, he was a good host. He's coming back next year. Can I just say, next year they announced it for March 15th.
Ooh.
Too late.
Too late.
They should put that shit in
January.
Yeah,
I agree.
Because I'm tired of like these movies like Anora and The Brutalist, just discourses that last 6 months for these. Like, holy shit, shut the fuck up.
And
watch another movie.
Yeah, please. Watch anything
Watch
else.
a Kansas City Trucking Company or something.
And when the Oscars ended, all I could think of, these are boring. Why do I watch these?
Yeah.
They're long. I don't really care about most of the awards. And, whoever won, I'm like, okay.
Did you make a point? I know you didn't. I'm just saying this.
It's a rhtorical question
yeah.
to lead to conversation.
Did you make a point of watching all or any of the movies because they were nominated? Okay. Couldn't even make it to the end of the sentence.
No. So I saw The Brutalist. We've discussed it.
Yeah.
I saw Anora. And what are the other big best?
You saw Conclave.
I did see Conclave. It was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else was nominated?
It doesn't matter.
This is the problem doing it 2 weeks later. I've completely forgotten.
They've been swallowed up and spit out.
What about A Real Pain? Did you see that?
I did. I liked it.
It's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. This is a real Oscars. Like, I always want when I watch these to have like 2 or 3 that I'm like cheering on. If you know what I mean.
And I actually didn't really feel like I had any I was cheering on.
Me neither. You'd think Sean Baker would be a guy, but you know what?
I like
too popular.
Yeah, I like Anora.
Unless, Mr. Baker, you want to be on this podcast?
Sure.
Yeah. We love you on.
Anora's okay, but it's probably like my 4th or 5th favorite Sean Baker movie.
I wonder if I would have liked it more if there wasn't that like wave of hype that came before it, right? Yeah.
Maybe. I like Starlet. That's probably my favorite still.
Of his?
Yeah.
I really like Red Rocket.
I haven't seen.
You haven't seen Red Rocket? Oh,
Yeah.
I gotta see that. It's great.
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned this before, but like Sean Baker was a guy that I heard on a horror movie podcast, like when he was making, I think Tangerine had just come out.
Yeah.
And he was just talking about like, my first film was a Kevin Smith ripoff called 4-Letter Word, and like it didn't really work out. And then I realized that, I should approach things from a different angle. And what he meant by that was sex workers.
Right.
That's the angle that he needs to approach it. Yeah, over and over again. Could he break out of that kind of, I guess Red Rocket is
right
kind
now
of like that.
he can probably do whatever he wants.
Yeah, I'd be curious, but like he's clearly following his passions. His career is not one defined by, I need to, make something that'll be popular.
No.
Like, because Anora doesn't fit within that. And I believe he's basically funding them independently. And that's what and he's big on theatrical distribution and seeing stuff on film, et cetera, et cetera.
I am curious what will happen next with him because like all of his movies have been, they've been bigger and bigger independent films. Anora cost what, $6 million? And I'm just curious, like, to be making a $6 million movie that wins Best Picture, like, does he suddenly get like a $50 million budget?
No, he doesn't want that.
What does
I think
that look like?
I think he's talked about that. It doesn't really interest him.
Yeah,
because like the stories he wants to tell, they're not in that era. It's like he's not going to take a Marvel movie or make his big studio film. He's just like making the movies that he wants to make, and that they can be financially kind of reasonable in that way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like the Florida Project that got nominated for a whole bunch of awards. Did it win any? I don't
think so, but Willem Dafoe was nominated a lot for that movie.
And the other movies, they've basically evaporated at this point, right? They don't really matter.
Yeah, Oscars, what can you say? It is Hollywood's biggest night.
But like,
did you watch the On Cinema Oscars this year?
No, I don't. I can't follow all that on cinema. There's too much of it.
Okay, well, I will say that
I know Eric Roberts. I looked for clips. You guys are not doing a good job because I wanted some Eric Roberts clips, and the only one that I found was him being like, fantastic movie. Probably the best I've ever seen.
Yeah.
All right, let's get down in Eric Roberts' hole again. Like, seeing Eric Roberts on that On Cinema thing. Is he in on the joke? Or is he not in on the joke?
So I think he knows a joke is happening.
Yes.
But I don't think he knows what it is.
Okay, you don't think he knows?
I don't think... Well, I would be curious to know to what extent.
Because people said Eric Roberts, MVP of that On Cinema special.
Yeah, well, he brought a chaotic energy to it, for sure. There's a moment where he improvises something that very clearly he wasn't supposed to do. And you can see Tim Heidecker like react to it and incorporate it.
Yeah.
And I was watching that kind of marveling at Tim Heidecker's improvisational skill that he was able to just like click into it really quickly. I do think he was kind of an MVP just in the sense that like he was a strange presence there.
But the argument would be like all of those actors, the Joe Estevez's, the other people.
Well, Joe Estevez is clearly in on the joke.
So at this point, he's in on the joke. He knows what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. He may not have been at the beginning, but now he knows.
Will Eric Roberts, do you think, become a regular fixture of the On Cinema universe?
I would love if that happened, but I think he may be too much of a wild card.
You think Tim Heidecker's like, I can't?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I would love to see him back.
What do you think his quote was for that?
Probably the same day rate he charges.
Yeah,
everyone.
he probably has a flat day rate, right?
Which is probably
$10,000.
It's probably less. I'm gonna. You know what I'm gonna guess?
Yeah.
Here's my guess for Eric Roberts' day rate. People write in and tell me if I'm right. $500. I bet you can get Eric Roberts for $500 a day.
Now,
and I'm basing that off the sorts of movies he makes.
$500. I think that's too low.
$1,000?
Yeah. Would you want Eric Roberts on this podcast for $1,000?
I don't think he would do it for free.
No, yeah. Could you get a good interview out of Eric Roberts at this point?
Yeah, maybe. I think it just depends on the questions.
Yeah, or does he just not remember?
Do I have any questions? So what I would like to know is like, what do you think of David Decloux?
But he'd be like, I met him once.
Yeah,
like, it doesn't really.
I met him once, and we made 20 movies in one day, and that's it. So speaking of Eric Roberts, yesterday I watched a movie called The Butcher from 2009 by Jesse V. Johnson, and I found it because I was, just what I do periodically.
Going through Eric Roberts' filmography?
Yeah, scrolling, just seeing, is there anything interesting here? And I saw this letterboxed poster that had Eric Roberts holding two guns. And it looked like a little slicker than some of the other ones. And I thought, oh, what's this? Jesse V. Johnson. Of course, people know Jesse V. Johnson is a direct-to-video termite artist. He made a lot of Scott Adkins movies.
He was a stuntman earlier on.
Considered one of the better direct-to-video guys.
Now, if you had told me you were about to watch this movie, I would say, early Jesse V. Johnson, he's looking for his voice. It's not really until a couple Scott Adkins movies in that I feel he kind of hones it in. But The Butcher was his attempt to make a more artistic action film.
Right. So to be clear, like nothing you could have said would have warned me against watching.
No, you would have watched it.
Because I knew it was only going to be so good, probably. And it was not that bad.
Yeah.
Stylistically, I don't think it's quite on the mark.
I believe that I remember him saying that he wanted it to all be in black and white. And that there was some difficulty finding distribution because it was too artistic.
Well, yeah, it is kind of artistic. I mean, it's a slower paced movie consciously, but I was actually really impressed by Eric Roberts' performance in it.
So like when there's material for him to lock in, he locks in?
Maybe that's no longer the case. I don't know. Maybe he's lost those skills, but
I don't think he has. I just think not much is being asked of him in the things that he appears in.
Well, one of the interesting things about reading Eric Roberts' autobiography is he talks about how committed he was to Righteous Gemstones. And he actually lost weight for it. He created a whole look for the character, and he did a few episodes, but he was sad when his character was written off. So maybe he does have the fire still in him. I was just very impressed by him in The Butcher because I thought like he was really cool, really charismatic, really sank his teeth into the part. So if you want a good Eric Roberts performance.
Now, getting back to the Oscars and Eric Roberts, I'm bringing them together.
Hell yeah.
Why is it that Eric Roberts doing all these terrible, terrible films, no problem with it, live your life, those commercials in the Oscars, and all those goddamn celebrities trying to sell me that garbage, awful, hate it.
Yeah,
worst. I lose any respect for a celebrity in one of those commercials.
This is something that Bill Hicks was right about.
Yeah.
You remember that routine where he was like, you do a commercial and you're famous. You're off the artistic map forever. Well, I actually kind of believe that, especially when it's like,
Chris Pratt, how much money do you need?
Yeah,
why do you need to sell me? Or like Chris Hemsworth, you are Thor. You do not need to make a commercial about like Saudi Arabia.
I know.
What the hell is going on?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know.
It's not even like those two that I mentioned. It's not even like I'm ashamed of them. It's like morally repugnant what they're advertising to me.
Well, I think Tom Selleck should be in prison for selling all those reverse mortgages.
Absolutely.
I think, and also all those celebrities who did like Bitcoin ads, or crypto
Sorry,
ads.
Larry David, you're going in the gulag.
Larry David should get a year in prison.
Matt Damon
should get 10 years in prison. I'm sorry.
And like, I guess they just don't think about it, just like a payday, and they're like, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
It's like I make these movies for these giant blockbuster studios that are morally bankrupt. What is the difference between me going to the next level and selling you like, I don't know, at-home suicide kits or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. And Saudi Arabia, they're like, oh, that's a big movie market.
And there were so many ads. Did you notice? Like, I think they're playing. Is it Saudi Arabia or is it some other like plays in theaters all the time?
I know the one you're talking about.
Where it's like,
not,
London, it's too wet.
It's Dubai.
It's Dubai.
That's what it is.
That's what I'm thinking of. We're just like, fuck off.
Yeah.
This is awful. I hate all of this.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm taking a stand and I'm not watching any more Chris Pratt or Chris Hemsworth movies. Unless there's one that looks interesting.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, so.
Hey, The Rock. Maybe he's coming back.
Yeah.
Maybe.
We'll see.
That new Martin Scorsese film that's probably never going to happen.
Yeah,
I'm saying this now, and then people 5 years from now will be like, Justin said it was never going to happen, but it did.
There's a new Martin Scorsese movie announced every week.
Yeah.
And this one looks like the least likely of them. But
Like
hey,
a Make-A-Wish.
Yeah.
Like it was The Rock approached Martin Scorsese to see if he would make the film, and Scorsese was like, yeah, whatever. When I get
Yeah.
through the other stuff.
Yeah.